Cheers, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I am Dave Brown, and this is the New Populist. Last week, Vladimir Putin announced his partial mobilization, 300,000 troops called up that will eventually head to Ukraine, at least some of them. And while that was a big part of the speech, another part that the Western media is really focusing on is this alleged threat by Vladimir Putin to use nuclear weapons. And across the Western media, they're all saying, how serious is this? Would he actually drop a nuke in Ukraine if Russia is losing with conventional forces? But my question is, did he really say that? Now, when Biden gives a speech, or any president in the United States, you get a transcript. And likewise, Russia also has a transcript that has an English translation of this speech by Vladimir Putin. Now, he refers to nuclear weapons a few times in this speech, or just nuclear in general, because he's also talking about the power plant in Ukraine. But there are two paragraphs in particular that the Western media is focusing on. And I want to read these two paragraphs to you. And I want you to decide whether or not he's actually threatening to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine in the manner in which the Western press is sort of showing. And he says here, in these two paragraphs, they have even resorted to the nuclear blackmail. I am referring not only to the Western encouraged shelling of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, which poses a threat of a nuclear disaster, but also to the statements made by some high-ranking representatives of the leading NATO countries on the possibility and admissibility of using weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, against Russia. I would like to remind those who make such statements regarding Russia that our country has different types of weapons as well, and some of them are more modern than the weapons NATO countries have. In the event of a threat to the territorial integrity of our country and to defend Russia and our people, we will certainly make use of all weapon systems available to us. This is not a bluff. Now, again, is he saying if we're losing in Ukraine, we're going to nuke Ukraine? And when I look at that, there's a little vagueness there, but any president of a nuclear power, when it comes to their nuclear arsenal, has to have a certain level of vagueness so that we can't say 100% what the other person is going to do. Now, there is the little wrinkle here. He talks about territorial integrity. Well, they have these 4 regions that just voted to join Russia. Would that count as now part of the Russian Empire or Russian motherland that needed to be defended? And so I guess from that point, maybe he could say that he might use nuclear weapons if they're threatened. But so far, and what we've seen, they're fighting a conventional war there. And I think this is more in response to the question of whether or not we're going to give weapons to Ukraine that can reach Moscow. And that's where the U.S. government has been, they've stopped short of giving them these longer range missile systems. And even the ones they've gotten right now, the HIMARS systems in Ukraine, are pretty effective. They are troublesome for Russia. And Russia has said, if you go further than that and you give them these 300-mile range systems, now that's escalation that we cannot allow. So when I hear the statement here, I don't really freak out and go, he's threatening weapons. He's more of saying, there's a line, if you cross it, we have to defend ourselves at some point. And considering the fact that we are essentially fighting Russia through Ukraine by giving them all of our weapons, we have our intelligence helping to spot Russian troop movements. We are essentially getting Russians killed by having our intelligence services say, hey, strike here, strike there. They're not over there, go there. So we're directing the battlefield where we are getting Russians killed, probably in the, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands over this whole conflict. So irrespective of whether or not you think this conflict is right or wrong, or how evil Vladimir Putin is, there is if you're a Russian person, you have to go, screw the United States. They're getting our guys killed, helping the Ukrainians to be more effective. So looking at that statement, nothing jumps out as being so extreme as him threatening like a crazy madman to just drop nukes in Ukraine. Now, there's a think tank in Washington, D.C. that actually monitors our nuclear policy in this country. And what's funny is our policy isn't just about preventing nuclear war or having a nuclear arsenal that is retaliatory. There's actually a provision, or actually a doctrine that Biden adopted from Obama, that says we could actually use nuclear weapons in other situations. And what are those situations? Well, it says here, Biden's policy declares that the fundamental role of the U.S. nuclear arsenal is to deter a nuclear attack, but will still leave open the option that nuclear weapons could be used in extreme circumstances to defend the vital interest of the United States or its allies and partners, according to a March 25th report by the Wall Street Journal. This might include nuclear used to deter enemy conventional, biological, chemical, and possibly cyber attacks. So our own U.S. doctrine says if we deem it necessary, we might use a nuclear weapon not to as a response to an attack on us by a nuclear power, but because we judge their actions to be extreme enough where we can use a nuke as a response. So, is that much different than what Vladimir Putin just said right there? That they would use a nuclear weapon if their territorial integrity was threatened. I don't think it's that different. So why are we freaking out? Why are all the newspapers saying this? Well, it's the obvious thing. They have for the last, probably 10, 20 years, have assigned every label to Vladimir Putin. He stole the 2016 election. He hacked the DNC. Every bad thing on this planet is Vladimir Putin's fault. And pretty soon, I guarantee you that they will conclude that it was Vladimir Putin that got the pipelines bombed in the right off the coast of Germany, I guess the Netherlands. So this is part of the effort of the Western media to create this image of Russia as being this boogeyman that's so terrible. And of course, and I always say this, Russia is far from perfect. They're not their government is this somewhat authoritarian. There is more democratic elements in their society than our media admits. So I'm not a Russia defender, but I try to look at both sides and go, from a geopolitical standpoint, is what they're doing and saying founded in some sort of rationale? And the idea that a country like Russia could behave irrationally all the time for all these years is nonsensical. Even a crazy guy like Kim Jong-un in North Korea, as crazy as he is, there's still a line that he knows not to cross because it would get him and his country destroyed. And the same thing with Russia. Even if you think that they're a little loony or crazy, or Putin's a crazy guy, he could do anything, he's been around for a while, 20 years. Clearly, he has some common sense, and he's not going to just say and do things that have no rationale that could get him and his country destroyed. The worst thing you can do, and this is what our media does so much, is so annoying, is it takes your enemy and just makes him into a caricature. And the last thing you want to do is underestimate your opponent. And that's where we have this sort of contradiction. Putin's this crazy guy who's just this idiot, but he also stole the 2016 election. Does a complete idiot have that capability? Well, if he did steal the 2016 election and he's a complete idiot, what does that say about our intelligence services that are supposed to defend our country? So they're talking about, our media talks about both sides of the mountain when they talk about Russia. But I'll just set it straight. Putin is not an idiot. He's smart, he's shrewd, and from his perspective, whether or not you agree with it, he's doing what he thinks he needs to do to protect the Russian country, Russian homeland. I'm an American. I would rather him not have invaded Ukraine. There are tens of thousands of people being killed, and my fear has always been this escalation. Putin announces this partial mobilization. Then we have this gas lines being destroyed. This is all part of that escalation. And, again, this gas line, there's so far no one's saying 100% who did it. But the argument that Russia had an incentive to do this doesn't make much sense. They could turn the gas off. They can use it as a bargaining chip. But if we blow it up, the United States, we're essentially forcing the Europeans to commit fully to this war, because the fear is, if as winter goes on and more people are freezing in Europe, they start to turn on their government and say, hey, let's cut a deal, let's turn this gas back on, we're freezing here. But if we, the United States, blow up these gas lines, well, guess what? That option is off the table. Now they're fully committed. They can't run to their politicians in Europe and say, make a deal, because there's nothing they can do. Which, if I'm a European, you have to ask yourself, how much of a friend is the United States to you guys if we did, in fact, blow up these gas lines? Are we going to pay in the United States? Are we going to be freezing? Nope. You will be. And again, this is where you have this really cynical foreign policy from the United States. And if you've seen what we've done the last 30 years across Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, and Syria, this shouldn't surprise you, other than it is surprising that if we did do this, it's Europeans that we're kind of screwing over here, not brown people in the third world. These are our allies, our friends, our cultural assimilars. We're screwing you guys over. But if I can, look at the last 7 years and learn anything, it's that there's nothing that we won't do to protect or accomplish our objectives in the United States, at least the neoliberal wing of our government, which seems to be most of the government. I would take the neoconservatives, neoliberals, they're part of the same team. So they will do anything to accomplish their objectives. And when it comes to Russia, they are especially energetic and willing to do anything. The hatred for Russia is insane. It's almost beyond rationale, but it's there. It's real. And I think they would even do things, even if it meant that we might have a nuclear confrontation. I think they're that crazy and that out of pocket that they would push that far. That's my fear. And we'll find out these next 6 months just how bad things or how far things will go as this war progresses. So we need to hold on to our hats. Well, that's it for now. Again, if you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.